What's up, Wolfpack fans? What's up, Duke Blue Devil fans? This is a special Locked On crossover episode, free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This crossover episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. I'm Grayson Boone, joined by my Locked On Wolfpack co-host Kenton Gibbs and the host of Locked On Blue Devils in JJ Jackson. JJ, we're getting excited for this matchup on Saturday night. We appreciate you hanging out with us.
Excited to talk about this one, a Locked On crossover for both of our listening audiences and YouTube viewers to check us out. A fun game between Duke and NC State. We haven't had enough of these games in recent years, so I'm excited that they're back on the annual calendar for us.
Shockingly few. I believe the last time we saw each other was in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. But even before that, way too many gap years between Duke and NC State here. This first portion, we're going to focus on Duke, so we'll jump right into it here. Most of the focus for NC State in talking about Duke is on Riley Leonard. Of course, we're all concerned about his status coming into the game. Mike Elko said he's day-to-day. A lot of us are starting to believe maybe we might not see him, being that a high ankle sprain takes a bit longer than a week and a half to heal from. Where do you currently stand on the likelihood of seeing Riley on Saturday night?
Well, I'll tell you one thing, as we've talked about a lot this week on Locked On Blue Devils, we have not heard much from Duke in terms of the status of Riley Leonard. On Monday, we heard day-to-day from Mike Elko, and nobody is saying anything whatsoever inside that building as to what his status is. The fact that he's listed as day-to-day, though, guys, to me is so shocking. When you go back to 2 weeks ago, of course, Duke coming off a bye week right now, the injury he suffered in the final minute of that Notre Dame game, when that takes place on the field, you immediately fear for the worst. I think college football fans across the world that were watching that game was like, yep, Duke's season's over. Riley Leonard's season is over. So the fact that there's even a conversation to be had about whether or not Riley Leonard is playing in this game on Saturday is remarkable and such a blessing for the Duke football team. With that being said, I still don't think he's going to be playing quarterback for Duke on Saturday against NC State. I think it will be Henry Beelan IV. But again, guys, just the fact that this is a conversation that we can honestly have is amazing because, boy, I tell you what, when that game ended against Notre Dame, every single awful thought was in Duke football fans' heads for sure.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you this much, okay? I've got my folks around every program in the ACC and all that, and I've heard now he's ahead of schedule, but there's no way he plays this Saturday. That's just what I've heard. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not gonna lie to y'all and say, "Hey, I'm going to this source of ton." Not gonna lie. But what I have heard is he is ahead of schedule. He's improving much more quickly than people thought he was. But we're not gonna see Riley on Saturday. But either way it goes, if I'm Duke, I'd rather not in terms of the goals that you have in front of you. You are currently undefeated in conference. And on top of that, you're looking at a situation where if we are to say, well, hey, Louisville, UNC, and Florida State, none of them play each other, you still got a couple of them on your schedule that you can go see about, that you can go, hey, we're going to take the Liberty Bell and we're going to ruin your time, boys in baby blue. That's what we can do here. And I just don't think that it's worth it to risk him in this game for, but I'm not even saying that this is a guaranteed loss if he doesn't play, but sometimes you got to tell yourself, lose the battle to win the war, brother. That's just how this thing should work out.
And you still have games at Florida State, at Louisville, and then, as you mentioned, the game against North Carolina for the Victory Bell, that's up for grabs. The other thing I think that's important to talk about, again, day-to-day, the official kind of diagnosis for Riley Leonard. Again, I do think Henry Beelan is going to be the starter. It seems as though there's plans to let Riley Leonard possibly dress out as of right now, kind of go through the warm-ups and that. But even that, I think, is a stretch. Like, if he's not available to play, let's just shut it down and go into it with Henry Beelan IV. But another conversation that's had in Durham, and yes, these conversations are happening. It's not basketball season fully just yet, although Duke fans are always excited for then when that comes around. But Kenton, his draft status is something that has also been brought up a little bit, because I tell you what, you look at the quarterbacks in this year's draft class, there are two really big names at the top there.
Yeah.
And then not too many names. And Riley Leonard's name is amongst the top when it comes to NFL draft quarterbacks. I don't know this to be true for Riley himself. If you listen to any interview this Duke does, we would run through a brick wall for him, as Duke football fans absolutely love the guy. But I think it's worthy to have a little conversation. Like, is that a little bit of the thought process in terms of rushing back too quickly and putting yourself up for potential worse injuries?
Now, addressing, I guess, the elephant that would be in the room if Leonard is out, Henry Beelan comes to the helm to take over, to fill in, at least for this game. How much of the offensive game plan would shift drastically with the absence of Leonard?
I don't know that it's a whole lot, guys, truthfully. I mean, you look at what Duke has done this season, and talking about Riley Leonard and his kind of status and thought of being one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league, Duke hasn't thrown the football a whole lot this season anyway. They really have relied on the running game heavily, whether it be Jordan Waters, who has already found the end zone 8 times through 5 games this season, or Coleman behind him in the backfield. Jaquez Moore is a young running back with a lot of promise on this team. So if Henry Beelan comes into play, you still have the outside playmakers to throw the ball to if you're a Kevin Johns offensive coordinator for Duke calling the plays. But I don't know that it changes too much considering what they will do. Yes, it's a quarterback making his first career start at home, nighttime game against a really good NC State team. You want to make sure that you don't do too much to put him in too big of a spot and that sort of thing. But yeah, I really don't know that we'd see too much of a different game plan for Duke. That's what I think.
So let me ask you this. Who are the perimeter playmakers that you would say, NC State fans, you don't know this guy, but this is a guy to watch outside of course, a Jalen Calhoun or Waters? Who are the guys that you're like, hey, this is a guy. If you stop him, you're doing a good thing for yourself?
Well, I think it goes back to our point a little bit earlier that this is the first game since 2020 between these two schools, and it's the first time in a decade. 2013 was the last time that the Wolfpack made the trip to Durham. So there's good reason why you might not know too many of these Duke playmakers. I'm glad that we'll have more of that conversation in the years to come. But Jordan Moore is a player that you're going to see a lot. Number 8 on your television screens, a slot receiver for Duke that has made so many big-time plays throughout the season. So much so, to give you a little story on him, this time a season ago in fall camp prior to the 2022 season, there was a quarterback battle to be the starter between Riley Leonard and Jordan Moore. And it was back and forth. And ultimately, Riley Leonard is named the first quarterback in Mike Elko's tenure as Duke football's head coach. Jordan Moore immediately moves to wide receiver. At this time, if there's an injury, okay, maybe Jordan Moore is going to be the guy that steps in because he had came recruited as a quarterback and that sort of thing. He's done so well as a wide receiver that is not even a question at this point. Like, this guy is an absolute playmaker with the ball in his hands. So getting him involved in the passing game, I think, is huge. I think of a tight end like Nicky Dalmolin, who's going to be a part of the attack as well. And then to mention the running backs, once again, Jalen Coleman and Jaquez Moore right behind Jordan Waters in that backfield. There are definitely some playmakers that Duke's going to look to utilize.
And then my last Duke question here, I'll shift over to the defense. Duke's defense has been one of the better defenses in the ACC thus far. Number 1 pass defense in the ACC. The run defense is about middle of the pack, but still enough to hold a Clemson team to 7 points, holding a Notre Dame to just 14. What can NC State fans expect to see out of a Duke defense on Saturday night?
Yeah, I mean, the first one of the season against Clemson, everybody's watching this. It's a Labor Day night game, and Duke walks away with the win in Durham 28-7. And I said throughout the year, teams are going to score more than 7 points against Duke. Like, that's just going to happen. Don't get used to that. I say that, fellas, in 3 of the 5 games this season, they've only given up 7 points. And then in the other games, there was 14 and 21. So this is a Duke team that has only given up 56 total points. You look at what I know the Marshall game, there are a couple of defensive scores factored in there and that sort of thing for the Wolfpack, but that was 41 points on the opponent's scoreboard at the end of the day for NC State. So this Duke defense has done a phenomenal job, yes, defending the pass, but more importantly, just keeping you off the scoreboard to let their offense do a little bit of the work. This
Duke defense there's something special. You know what I mean? It starts up front, that defensive line, intense. They are that's a nasty group to go up against. And they got depth. I think that's the thing that you're surprised about from a Duke team, because we've seen different times where they've had a good edge rusher or two. You have never seen them be strong up the middle, have multiple good defensive tackles, and have backups that can come in and be more than capable as well.
Yeah, whether it be Dwayne Carter and Aeneas Peebles, Jamion Franklin, I mean, the list goes on and on. RJ Oben of players who are making big-time plays on that defensive front for Duke. The secondary, the job that they've done this season, as you said, first in the league so far in pass defense, with it being two transfers in Al Blades Jr. and Miles Jones from Miami and Texas A&M respectively. So just crazy that the defense has put together the type performances that they've had this season, because if you go into kind of preseason conversations with this Duke football team, again, you're talking a whole lot about the offense and Riley Leonard coming back and asking yourselves, okay, new defensive coordinator in Tyler Santucci. It is Mike Elko's side of the ball, but really, what are we going to get out of this Duke football defense? And I tell you what, it's been one of the best in the league so far, and that's been fun to see.
In just a moment here, we're going to change chairs, and Kenton and I will field JJ's questions about the NC State Wolfpack after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's first sponsor is LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have the best access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Then use simple tools like screening questions to make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Back into a Locked On crossover. This is Locked On Wolfpack and Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson here representing the Duke Blue Devils. We've got Grayson, Boone, and Kenton Gibbs talking about the NC State Wolfpack. So Duke fans out there, you're asking yourselves, who is this NC State football team? Tell us a little bit about it. So we'll do that right now. Guys, you look at NC State so far this season. We started quarterback with Duke. I think if you're looking at any football team out there, you want to start talking quarterback as well. We go into the year assuming that we're going to see Brennan Armstrong being the quarterback for the NC State Wolfpack after transferring over from Virginia. And we did, but that's not the case anymore. My question is simply this: how did we get here? How did we get to the current quarterback situation that the Wolfpack have themselves in?
Well, I'll start this one off. You were correct in that we were going to see Brennan Armstrong, and more of them than some of us petitioned to see. But in reality, I think it was just a situation where there were too many flat performances by the offense as a whole. And at the end of the day, regardless of what your mantra is or how you do it, right? Even if you look at a team like Wisconsin that keeps 6, 7 offensive linemen that are probably going to be in the NFL one day on the roster at any given time, and they want to run the ball and pound, you still got to have a signal caller that can get the ball to where it has to go and do so in a safe manner, right? You want to protect the ball and all that good stuff. And Brennan Armstrong just wasn't doing that at the level that you would expect from a 6-year guy. And I don't know. I doubt that this was Dave Doran's reasoning. I think that his reasoning was that the offense needed a shot in the arm. But for me personally, I'm always a believer. If we're going to lose, if we're going to struggle with young guys. Because if you struggle with old guys, when they finally learn their lesson in terms of, oh, no, I can't throw it to the flats against cover 2, good for you. You're gone now, right? If you do that with MJ, he can learn, oh, this is my second year. I got 2 more years, 2 more cracks at this thing in terms of learning what I need to learn. So, you know, ultimately 3 turnover games in both of our losses and our offense just not looking all that stellar through the first 5 games is what prompted that switch. And the game against Louisville was downright despicable offensively. Downright despicable. Our defense got them the ball multiple times in plus territory, and we absolutely pissed down our legs and did nothing with it offensively. And so a change really needed to be made for the team standpoint, from the fan standpoint. Something had to change.
Yeah, I mean, Kenton covered the majority of it here, but when you have so many performances stacked in a row of just continually spinning your tires in the mud, and you have a fully capable quarterback at QB2, you simply have to make the decision one way or another. Ultimately, the decision came down after that brutal Louisville loss on that Friday night. We saw MJ last week against Marshall, and of course, not all of our offensive struggles are fixed now, but you instantly saw that shot in the arm that we have been dying to see. It opened up the deep ball for us. The run game got a little bit of help because the threat of a pass is now there. Everything looked just slightly better with MJ Morris in there, and we're certainly hoping to continue this this week on the road at Duke.
Well, let's keep this going then. Who is MJ Morris? This is the name that you're talking about. Who's this guy that's come in and kind of revitalized the team at the quarterback spot?
Well, to quote Cool Runnings, he's a bad mother sucker that don't give a darn about nothing. No, but seriously, MJ Morris he's a young quarterback. He came in last season when we went through 4 quarterbacks. He was one of those, and he was a revelation last year. This is not a freshman that got here in spring, which we see most of the time in freshmen. This was a young man who was slow dancing at prom and being a high schooler all the way up through the summer. And yet when he got on campus, he had camp and that was it. And when he got into the game, he looked special, out-dueling Sam Hartman, playing a game that you really have to look at him and say, man, it's all there. He's got all the tools in terms of hitting deep balls, in terms of being on time, in terms of making things happen, a little bit of chaos. And he's shown all that this year, right? A lot of people look at the first game, his first start, and say, oh my God, 3 interceptions, how terrible. But with that in mind, we're looking at a quarterback who's a special talent. I have not seen a throw that he can't hit yet. I'm talking outside the numbers deep. I'm talking on time and the underneath game and all that. MJ Morris is a QB1 that is maybe not as mobile as a Brennan Armstrong, maybe not as looking as much of a searcher to run as Brennan Armstrong. But honestly, that's a little bit of a good thing in terms of he sticks in there and he's going to go through his reads the best of his ability before he delivers it.
So, Grayson, I want to ask you then, MJ Morris is the guy at quarterback. He can't do it all by himself, though. So who are those skill guys on the offense that Duke fans need to be aware of?
Well, the number one name that you may have heard is KC Concepcion, which is a little bit funny because that's not actually his name. Kevin Concepcion, he is just a freshman, wide receiver. He's been named Rookie of the Week several times here in the ACC with a couple breakout performances against UVA and then last week against Marshall. I'd have to imagine that a lot of Duke's attention will be on Concepcion, so there will be an increased amount of pressure on the run game for NC State, I believe. Sophomore running back Michael Allen will be in the fold there. He is now our starting running back after Jordan Houston decided to leave the program just a couple weeks ago. But NC State, their offensive coordinator this week, interesting you asked this, he's been openly calling for more involvement for more of the skill players in this offense. And so we might even be asking the same question this week. Who is going to step up for NC State in this game against Duke? Because there is a lot of youth on this team in the wide receiver room. There's a bit of inexperience as well, despite having the 75-year-old man in Bradley Rosner, the 8th-year grad transfer. But this game is super interesting for the NC State offense because it is the first game on the road for a young quarterback in MJ Morris. And the best wide receiver production we've had is going to be bracketed up by the number one pass defense in the ACC. So we are also looking around for who is going to produce the most in this game.
So we've talked a lot about this Duke football team and the questions that the Blue Devils have at quarterback in regards to the health of Riley Leonard. Whatever that Duke football offense looks like remains to be seen, but it's an offense that's going to be going up against an NC State Wolfpack Kenton. Their defense looks like what? What do we need to know about that unit?
Oh, they're coming with the 3-3-5. Very unique front. Very interesting type of deal because you never know when the blitz is coming. You never know where it's coming from. You just know it's coming. You know what I mean? It's not a if they blitz, it's a when. It's a how. It's a, that type of deal. And the leader of that thing is Mr. Peyton Wilson, number 11 in red and white, number 1 in our hearts. But very seriously, this gentleman, I say this all the time, and I genuinely mean it. He did NC State a solid in coming back. He has very little to gain by coming back to NC State. Everybody knew who he was. He's led the ACC in tackles before. He's made the star-studded plays and all that before. And now he's somehow gotten better. We didn't know that there was another level for him to hit. And he said, hey, this defense, if you don't know which way to go, I'll make it easy. Follow me. There have been multiple plays that would have been touchdowns if we didn't have number 11 on NC State's defense. And I'll tell you this, on top of the exotic blitz looks, you'll also see behind it some corners that are, when they lock onto you in man, congratulations. They latch onto you tighter than Sam Smith was talking about in that one song. And I'm going to tell you, they're really hard to shake. Aiden White is one of the best corners in the country. He has shown it and proven it at multiple points. Shaheem Battle is no slouch on the other side either. He's had some struggles at the moment of truth this year, but even beyond that, he has been phenomenal as well. So this is a defense that all in all, you look at them up and down. You know, I've talked about 3 guys that have been in the program forever, but Poogie Kennedy, that is a big name. He's our nickel / rover, whatever you would like to call that in the 3-3-5. He is everywhere and all the time. He is a sawed-off little heat-seeking missile. And let me tell you, he's always Johnny on the spot when you need him.
Well, you talk about that defense for NC State, and stopping the run is something that they have done so well over the years. And a lot of it, I would imagine, has to do with that defensive front. So you look at Duke's backfield, they want to run the football. NC State doesn't want to let you run the football as well. So looking at that and knowing that there is kind of this quarterback uncertainty for Duke, I'd ask you guys, what do you think this NC State Wolfpack defense is expecting, considering what you've seen from them through these first 5-6 weeks of the season? What do you think that defensive unit for NC State is expecting on Saturday?
If I'm Tony Gibson and the NC State defense, I want to force Duke into throwing as often as possible, being that run defense is our absolute strength. And Kenton talked about Peyton Wilson. He has done legitimately everything other than catch a car thrown at him in the air. He has been Superman. And I mean that in every sense of the imagination. He has been one of the top linebackers, if not the top linebacker in the country. And so the run defense will be there. We had a couple struggles earlier in the year. We also had a backbreaker from Audric Estime from Notre Dame. That killed us in that game. But we've seen Jawar Jordan from Louisville, snuffed him out. We saw Rasheen Ali from Marshall last week, who will also likely be an NFL running back, held him to virtually nothing as well. And so the run defense is more than likely going to show up. I truly think that they found their stride here as the season has gone on. So you're going to want to force, if it is Henry B. Lynn, you're going to want to force him to throw as often as possible. And even if it's Riley Leonard as well, the passing attack has not been Duke's strength. So you want to force them into uncomfortable situations. Tony Gibson's more than likely going to design a lot of exotic blitzes to get a whole multitude of looks to force some interceptions, maybe some fumbles, just bad decisions. That is the biggest opportunity that NC State will have to get Duke off their game here.
Let me tell you something. The game plan for this game, it don't matter who's at quarterback, bring the house like a good realtor. You understand? I'm telling you right now, the goal for this game is to make whoever is back there uncomfortable and stop the run via following their blitz tracks, setting the traps in their dogs that just work out in that way. And I like how you talked about, the defensive line and the ability to stop the run, because NC State also has depth up front. You look at C.J. Clark, one of the best nose tackles in the conference, but then the guy behind him, Brandon Cleveland, he's the sack supreme guy in the middle. He's always forcing a fumble every time you look up. Davin Vann, I was a guy who bought stock in him early. I said Davin Vann is going to be a dude this season coming up. He's going to be something special. And now he's what? Third or fourth in the conference in sacks. Like, this is a defensive front. And that's not even mentioning Savion Jackson, who's often mentioned as the most talented of that group. So, that's what you got going on there. Oh, and how could I ever forget Hibbler? I mean, Jakevius Red Hibbler, he's another guy, a super pass rusher. You bring him in, and instantly quarterbacks start to get a little nervous when they see 47 coming off the edge. So this is a defensive line. They bring you multiple different looks. They bring it in waves. And we also have a transfer from Ohio State and Cincinnati and Noah Potter, that he's a guy that's always where he's supposed to be. If his gap is the B gap, congratulations. That gap is going in that running play. So this is a group. They all bring something special. They all bring something different, but they're stopping the run because they are who they are. Because let's just be quite honest about it. There have been times where our linebackers have struggled a little bit. There have been times where our Mike linebacker in particular, our Mike linebacker position, has left a little bit to be desired. So this defensive line has been, and I believe will continue to be dominant going forward.
It should be a really fun game coming up on Saturday. We've been able to scout the Blue Devils and scout the Wolfpack as well. We're up for one more timeout. And then on the other side, we've got some final thoughts for you. What's at stake? What does this rivalry mean between Duke and NC State? And we'll talk about all of that and more after one more timeout here on Locked On Blue Devils and Locked On Wolfpack. This is a Locked On crossover. Our show here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. This is America's #1 sports book. FanDuel is where you need to be this time of year when you're talking about the NFL. What a fun game we saw last night between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Denver Broncos. New lines available right now with new customers getting $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, then there's no better time to get in on the action. Again, spreads, player props, over-unders. Are our home state Carolina Panthers ever going to win a football game? You can find those lines and so much more over at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. Last few moments here on today's episode. It's a Locked On crossover between NC State and Duke. I'm JJ Jackson from Locked On Blue Devils alongside Grayson, Boone, and Kenton Gibbs of Locked On Wolfpack. And guys, I simply want to start here when we talk about the rivalry between Duke and NC State, and we talk about the fact that there have only been 2 meetings in the last 10 years, the 2020 matchup, and then let's not forget a 2013 game that Duke fans remember as the Devon Edwards game. A man having a kickoff return for a touchdown, had 2 pick sixes within a 16-second span. We'll never forget a game like that before. But the fact that this game and this rivalry is coming back on an annual basis, what does that mean for NC State? Because I'll say this much for Duke. It means a whole lot. It just hasn't been fun when it's, a 25-minute drive between the campuses, and we haven't been able to play that game on an annual basis.
Yeah, so I'll start this off by saying, I mean, this is like we've already talked about, this is a rivalry that needs to happen more often. This is a game that needs to happen more often. This is something that's great, not only for like the ACC, but also these two fan bases, bragging rights, right? We always talk about how important that is, how great it is to be standing by the water cooler. Hey, you see that game last week? What a time. What a time for the Pack. Yeah, whatever. That's all that stuff is very important. And as we've seen from certain coaches in the triangle, state championship rings in college are apparently a thing too now. So, it's very important for these fan bases, for recruiting in the state, for keeping guys in the state, to say, hey, if you come play at Duke, you come play at NC State, not only will you, be playing in front of, the folks in Wallace Wade or the folks in Carter Finley every week, but you'll also have an opportunity to know that mama, grandma, dad, granddad, uncle, cousin, auntie, all that good stuff, they'll be there. They'll have the ability to be there, be at games like this where, you ain't got to travel nothing but 20 minutes down the road from where you would have traveled for a home game.
Yeah, and for NC State, we had a statement that has kind of gone by the wayside, but it was, this is our state. So playing these in-state games mean a lot to this NC State fan base. Both of our fan bases have a lot of beef with UNC. We understand this. The lack of the amount of times that we haven't seen Duke, this game needs to be a yearly occurrence. And it's honestly astonishing that it's not, being that we're only 25 miles away. But when you talk about this year as well, seeing that Duke has gotten off to a great start, they've beaten Clemson. They had a very close encounter with Notre Dame. Duke is ranked now. NC State now has a little bit of a new energy with the new quarterbacking situation. This is a massive game. And I honestly think it's been a little bit undercovered coming into this weekend, because this game has a lot of implications for both teams moving through the second half of the ACC schedule as well. And so this is a big time deal. I understand that Duke students are on their fall break now, so there have been a couple questions floating around about what kind of attendance we'll see. I do expect a pretty good contingency of red, but Duke football fans have a lot to be excited about this time of year as well. It's not just basketball, as you mentioned earlier, JJ. Duke football is very for real, and Mike Elko is doing one heck of a job here in 2023.
The last time we were inside Wallace Wade Stadium, College Game Day was there for the first time ever. An unbelievable atmosphere with Notre Dame in town. We already had the Monday night Labor Day game against Clemson. That was so outstanding and epic. So, again, kind of looking at what's at stake here, as you were mentioning, Grayson, for both of these teams at this point in the season. For Duke, it's an opportunity to remain in one of the driver's seats in the ACC. That Notre Dame loss does not go against you. And Duke, of course, already has the win against Clemson to start the year. I think that's incredibly important for Duke to continue to build confidence, even if Riley Leonard is not the guy playing quarterback. What's at stake for NC State in this one, guys, when you look at that ACC picture?
I mean, I think it's honestly everything, right? Like at this point in time in the ball game, you've got one conference loss to Louisville. I don't think that you can get there with 2 to 3. I just don't. Obviously, beyond the bragging rights, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but it really is big for recruiting to say, hey, we're the best team in the state. We played Duke, beat them. We played UNC, beat them. And with that being said, this is where we are. This is who we are as a program. We're going to show up and whoop the wheels off the teams in state. So if you want to stay home and win these ball games in the in-home rivalry, this is where you need to be at. It's a very important game to NC State in terms of getting back on track and proving some legitimacy for MJ Morris would be the last thing. MJ Morris in this offense would probably be the last thing, because I know plenty of people look at Marshall, and even though that's a good Marshall team, better than you would think, that is a team that people look at and say, oh, well, Marshall doesn't really count. Oh, no, that's not really – I believe they're in what, the Sun Belt Conference? Oh, they're not really a – listen. The reality is MJ Morris has to go out there and show it against a not only FBS but a Power 5 team that can, do some things, and that's shown to have an amazing defense. And so this game is important for all those reasons plus some.
A lot of the energy has shifted in just 1 week after this change. You can feel just a different energy in this team now. There's a lot more faith in, I guess, what's to come the rest of the season, as it was getting a little rough there amongst some struggles at the quarterback position earlier. So this is we spoke a couple weeks ago before this Louisville game that we had, and we talked about that game being a gigantic hinge for what the rest of the season might hold. After this shift to quarterback, it now feels like this Duke game is perhaps a second hinge for this team moving forward. If we can win this game, we can go into a bye week, get some guys some much needed rest. Then you have Clemson at the end of this month at home. That could be a toss-up depending on how that shakes out. And from there on out, if you build enough confidence, NC State could, keyword could, not saying should, find themselves at the end of this season perhaps knocking on the door for Charlotte.
As the Duke guy, I love that this game is being played in Wallace Wade Stadium with so many questions about that quarterback spot for the Blue Devils. In my head, I see this playing out like a 24-21 type ball game between these two teams. Las Vegas is right there with us. We just mentioned our friends over there at FanDuel. They've got Duke favored by 3 points. To wrap up our show here today, fellas, how do you guys think that this game ends up being played out?
Well, in the words of Aubrey Graham, 21, can you do something for me? I think that a 21-17 win is in the cards for NC State. And I say 21, can you do something for me in terms of I think that that'll be just enough to get over the hump here in terms of winning this game, because I see this. I'd be shocked and appalled if this was a shootout where both teams kind of had their way offensively and the scoreboard was like, this is a track meet on turf type of game. I think this is going to be, if you're a fan of old school 3 yards in a cloud of dust football, you're going to get your wish in this game.
We're all kind of on the same track of thinking here, in that it will more than likely be lower scoring dogfight in Wallace Wade on Saturday night. I do think NC State can pull this game out. I think their defense will show up to a big-time opportunity here. If MJ Morris and the offense can conjure enough and they can beat out Duke's defense just a couple times, I think they can put enough on the board to ultimately walk away with the win here. But I have NC State by a score of 23-17. It'll be a close one.
Excited to see how it plays out. A nighttime kickoff inside Wallace Wade Stadium. Watch the game at the ACC Network. And, of course, check out our shows on Monday to hear all the reactions, the breakdowns of everything that takes place when this one goes final between Duke and NC State. What a fun day this has been, guys, to be able to kind of break down this game with you. I'm sure we've got more Locked On crossovers in our future when basketball season comes around. It is a hoop state after all in North Carolina, and we've seen plenty of good ones between Duke and NC State over the years. So super excited for that one. So with that, make sure you subscribe to both of our podcast feeds. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. The algorithms absolutely love that. Check us out on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channels and so much more. For Grayson, Boone, Kenton, Gibbs, I'm JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.